Hello there, I kind of feel at this stage we're in the lull before the storm, as we're pretty much just waiting for the announcement of the pre-patch date. After a few weeks where there's been so much to discuss from the World Within beta, this week's update was almost entirely class tuning and bug fixes. Almost, that is. But before we get into all of that, Blizzard kicked off the week with the launch of another of the series of short stories from the Voices Within collection. This week's story is called Trials by Jonathan Maybury and features everyone's favourite orc, Thrall, his wife Agra, and both of his children, Durek and Retzi. We've encountered Durek in-game thanks to the Orc Heritage questline, which, by the way, if you have a level 50 plus orc and haven't done that questline yet, I do recommend you do. It is, along with the Draenei Heritage questline, one of the top questlines which truly manages to catch the heart and soul of orc culture. But getting back on track, this story puts a little bit more of the spotlight on Retzi, his youngest, and her relationship with her father. I'm not going to spoil the story, but it does end with a bit of a surprise twist, and it is, along with the Gazlo story from a few weeks ago, very much one of the top picks of this series. It's good to see a little bit of focus in some of the younger members of the World of Warcraft cast as they start to come of age. We're not quite at the point of there being a changing of the guard in Warcraft, but I would not be surprised if whatever follows the World Soul saga does deliver just that. I'll put a link down below to the story. This is the 5th of the series, which means that there's just one left. The Amazon listing for the book of the series originally said there would be 2 exclusive stories in the book, but that wording was actually changed first to just mention 1 and has now been completely removed. So I have a suspicion we're going to get all of the stories for free. Moving on to in-game news, and the big news from Blizzard this week was the announcement that character restoration will be unavailable for a few weeks following the launch of the World Within pre-patch. Blizzard's announcement explained that it's related to the transition of our characters to the new warband system. My guess is that the current restore function isn't compatible with warbands, and Blizzard have chosen to postpone getting it working in favour of focusing on the launch of the game, which for me is certainly fair enough. This does mean though that it's probably worth checking your roster of previously deleted characters just now to make sure there aren't any in there with odd achievements or stuff that you'd regret not having for the start of the new expansion. Moving on to this week's beta build, and the most notable change for me at least is more of an admin change, with the version number of the beta having been bumped up from 11.00 to 11.02. Old hands at World of Warcraft will no doubt recall that WoW expansions most commonly do launch with a 0.2 version number. Most likely this bump is due to Blizzard wanting to get a lockdown version for a release candidate for the pre-patch, while allowing them to continue to work on bug fixing and polishing the beta for the full expansion launch. This is very likely to be another sign that the pre-patch release is getting very close now. I'm honestly kind of surprised we've not already had the announcement of the release date for the pre-patch, given that it's most likely just about 2 weeks away. Moving on to the beta itself, and the most notable addition this week is the music for the main login screen. While I generally do enjoy World of Warcraft music, this particular version does stand out for me for all of the right reasons. It begins with a very ethereal introduction before launching into a modernised version of the original vanilla login music. I've always been a fan of that particular theme tune, so hearing an updated take definitely raised the hairs on the back of my neck. And just as well, the login screen itself, which was data mined in the recent weeks, has had a bit of a disappointed reaction from the community. Until now, World of Warcraft login screens have followed a bit of a formula with a more cinematic style image based on the themes of the expansion, whereas this one is just a bit more of a stylized logo. For me personally, the warband screen is the much more prominent part of the overall login experience than the old character creation screen was, so a more simplified login screen kind of works for me, and I do think that the music does add a lot to the experience of that. But do let me know in the comments if you think I'm wrong. Do you think the login screen could be more interesting? Are you disappointed that it doesn't open up onto the warband screen like a door animation? Something that honestly I admit could be kind of cool. Let me know in the comments down below. Staying on the subject of the character selection screen, and it's had a bunch of minor tweaks this week that offer some nice quality of life improvements and add a bit more dynamism to the experience. Hovering over our characters now shows a collection of useful information, including the character's realm, how much gold it has, and its major professions. The one piece of information that I'd personally like to see added though is the character's item level. We also, as of this week, can now see our entire collection of characters on the same login screen, no matter which realm they're on, which will certainly make it a lot easier to find them. Fortunately, the screen now also has a search function to save us from having to troll right through the list. The character creation button has also got a new tooltip to highlight what realm you're about to create the character on. A very handy reminder to change realms before creating one in the wrong place. Over time, this screen has been becoming a lot more dynamic, with the characters changing poses, reaction to be clicked on, and from this week, the screen now also changes its lighting in response to the time of day. And for those of you who have been wishing for a bit more customization, the ever vigilant Mr. GM has spotted early signs of a potential second scene in the game files. My guess is that it probably won't make it into the expansion launch, but it is hopefully signs that we'll be getting more options for the character select screen in future patches. After last week's edition of NPC crafting orders, and crafting has continued to see some love, with a major increase in the concentration cap from 500 to 1000. If you're not familiar with concentration, this is a new expansion's replacement for the inspiration stat. Instead of a random chance to create a better item than you normally can, you'll now be able to spend concentration to push items up in a more deterministic way. Concentration gradually accumulates over time, taking about 48 hours to reach a new cap. That's up from 24 hours to reach the previous 500 cap, so that basically accumulates at the same rate. The amount of concentration you use does depend on your skill gap, but it can be as high as 150 for a single item, so this increase will be super useful, especially for players who don't craft on a daily basis. For me, the changes to the crafting petitions do have a lot of potential. At the start of Dragonflight, I had plans to do a lot more with crafting, but I very quickly bounced off it and back to my old standby of gathering, partly due to the difficulty in finding work orders to level up without having an army of alts to create orders for you, and the RNG of inspiration. I'll probably still focus on gathering in the War Within as my main professions, but I do feel like I may well have another try at dipping into a couple of the crafting professions too. I personally really like the idea of being perhaps self-sufficient in creating my own gear, for example. Moving into the game, and if you've been concerned by the recent reports of a potential hard limit to the number of deaths that would be permitted in delves, then I've got a bit of really good news for you. Those reports were based on a tooltip in the Delve UI, which says that upon reaching 0 lives, our characters would retreat. While this limit wasn't ever enforced in the beta, the word retreat did heavily imply the possibility that it could become a hard limit. This week, the offending tooltip has been completely rewritten and now says that running out of lives will simply reduce the rewards granted. This incidentally is the behaviour that was described in Blizzard's own preview of the delves, so most likely that retreat text was either a bug leaking some old rejected plan, or it was just badly worded. But either way, it's very welcome to see the lack of a hard limit being reconfirmed like this. As I reported in my War Within preview of the flying changes, until recently Skyriding would unlock for characters at level 20 unless you were doing the Dragon Isles, where it would unlock instead at level 10. With this week's build, the again ever observant Mr. GM spotted that it now unlocks in all areas at level 10, at least for those of us who have unlocked it already in our warbands. It's currently unknown if this is also the case for new players, or if they still have to wait a little longer to get it, and unfortunately that's something that's not really possible to test out in the beta. Before I wrap up for this week's news, there was surprisingly one change that did sneak into the live game, albeit it's one that's probably only interesting if you're still working on the meta achievement to get the Taiwan mount. Blizzard have nerfed the requirements for the Lunker fishing achievements, including we're going to need a bigger harpoon, which was one of the requirements for that meta. This previously required 25 massive lunkers, and now that's down to only 10. Fishing up the lunkers required collecting ominous bonus conches, and you needed 5 of those for every massive lunker, and these could be pretty annoying to farm. These are also part of obtaining the auto mount, which is the cool sunglasses wearing Autuck. Sadly, this change has had a bit of a blast radius, as Blizzard also changed the conches to be unique 20, which caused any excess over 20 that you happen to have in your inventory to just mysteriously disappear. I personally lost more than 100, which isn't really a big deal as I'm done with the achievements, but having stuff removed from my character without any warning from the devs is pretty annoying, and it really doesn't fit in with the WoW team's new ethos of respecting players' time. The unique requirement is also causing issues with some of the Tuskar world quests and dailies, which award conches. So if you happen to already have more than 15 in your bank, maybe you've forgotten them. Those quests now fail to complete with very obscure error messages. Blizzard's hotfix did mention reducing the stack size, but they made no mention of making them unique. So I'm hoping that this is just a bug that they can fix. Unfortunately, I think I'll probably have to reconcile myself to those lost 100 conches never coming back though. Now, just before I drop off, if you've been in the beta and been a bit bemused by Anduin seemingly having had a very bad bit of chin surgery, the good news is that this week his chin has been tweaked to be a lot more realistic. With this change, I have to say I do like Anduin's makeover, which I think successfully reflects his in-game aging and the impact of the recent traumas on him very well. Well, that's all for this week's update. While there hasn't really been any major surprises, most of the smaller updates we've seen have been broadly positive. If you found this update useful and would like to encourage me to continue with them, then please hit that like icon to let me and the YouTube algorithm know. As well as releasing a weekly news recap every Saturday, I've been regularly releasing more in-depth previews of the War Within features, and in coming weeks I'll be releasing my guides to help prepare you for the new expansion. If you'd like to be notified when those go live, or even just to support my channel, then please do subscribe and hit the bell icon so that you're notified whenever I go live with a new video. That's all for now. I'll be back soon.